Okay, Herb Lair. Uh, this podcast is going to be about people and things, and maybe teams that you love to hate, and some that you hate to love. I guess there's a combination there. Some people, you just love to be around, and you don't have a problem. But I was going to give the example. I think since it came up in a classic game there between Georgia and Alabama, is that I think people kind of turned it off after it's 28-0 with Alabama just killing Georgia. And then if you happen to just tune back in and see what was going on there, then you found out later that Georgia started making a game of it. And finally, it got down to being a real close game. And then all of a sudden, it looked like Georgia was going to win and probably should have won. And they scored, and Alabama didn't have much time left. And they went down and made a 75-yard play that was pretty incredible, and they ended up holding off Georgia, who was at the goal line, to win the game. And I laugh about that. If you're not, a fan of either one of those teams, is uh, it could be a situation where, with Alabama, they're a team that you love to hate, uh, and then if it gets down to the point where they're going to lose, and you know, you can you can fall in love then again with the sympathy factor, at least for a while. But that turned pretty quickly, as it typically does. And Alabama came back and won, so you can still be normal situation, normal life of being something that you love to hate. Uh, I want to get into that a little bit in some of the things I'm going to be talking about, and I thought I'd go back and reflect on a few people. There was a thing on CBS about you know times when you kind of caught up with people that were celebrities, and what happened, and how was it handled. And I was thinking back in the '90s, and typically that was a time when I was out quite a bit with cable shows, and even before that. But in that particular period, there was a lot of different people you ran into. I know there's a show out in I think it's in Rhode Island, but it was a New England show, and I ran into Robin Roberts, who at that time was working for ESPN, and she took a picture and said "Go Hogs," and I kept that, and I've got it somewhere. And then there's other shows around the country that you travel to, and some of it could be in uh, Atlanta, and you catch a lot of the people there. You'd run into Ted Turner and some of the people that were, they were cable before it's cool, but you got to get to meet some of the people up front, and so there's a lot of interesting people there, a lot of sports people. They always brought those into the shows, and the big things annually was the a national show, which floated around a lot of times from Las Vegas to Dallas to Chicago to major large cities. I don't remember ever going to New York with that one, but I do remember a lot of New England, a lot of shows in New Jersey. And Atlantic City was a big place for that, and there were a lot of celebrities hanging out down there. And it was always a story when you went there to exhibit. They had a lot of things that they did a little different as far as handling your exhibit. They forced you to use their labor. You couldn't do much on your own, or you had to do something where you contracted people. And I remember one time going there, and I flew into New York, and um, from there I went on train down to Atlantic City. But it was crazy in New York getting the computer and everything over to transportation. So there are a lot of uh, regional shows. The Texas show is one of the bigger regional shows, and that is usually in San Antonio. So I always remember that being in February. The I guess a regional show that was a kind of a semi-national show was in Anaheim. So went there usually in December, and there were a lot of key exhibitors there, and it was nice when you went there because you're always going to spend a day or a night over at Disneyland. And one of the things there, you never knew exactly what you were going to see there. Maroon 5, I know, was one of the performers that we had there, and so you would go over there and the park would be open to the exhibitors and attendees, and I don't know, there was a pretty good number at that time, maybe 20, 30,000 people, because that was before all the consolidation. No, now I have had COVID, the COVID booster shot. I'm taking the pneumonia shot, and I have also taken the flu shot, so I'm not worried about the coughs or anything. It's just a matter of this time of year, you get a little bit of allergies in the air, so no big deal. But also the national show sometimes was out in California, and it would be at the in Los Angeles. So many times that's where you'd expect to go to shows, and Las Vegas was always a good place for national shows. So a lot of that went on. But what I was getting to is when I was thinking about Alabama, I was thinking about Joe Willie Namath showed up at the cable show one time. I think it had to do with sports and maybe senior sports and maybe I guess sports that some of the older clips. And so they had this channel out there, and I guess he was there paid to promote it. So he was standing there just around his booth, and so I headed over there. And I started talking to him, and I said, I kind of want to talk about. Let me get a napkin. I want to talk about the 1964 championship where Arkansas went undefeated. They beat Texas that year, of course, at Austin, and then came back and beat Nebraska in the Cotton Bowl. Well, in '64, they declared the national champion before the bowl games, which is, you wouldn't see that ever happening today. Now the national playoff, but at that time they had declared Alabama to be the national champion, but they had to play Texas, which had a good team. It was like number 3, so if Texas hadn't beat Arkansas, or Arkansas hadn't beat Texas, they would have probably been in running to beat national championship. But when Arkansas beat Nebraska earlier that day, it was going to be whether Alabama could kind of go undefeated with Joe Namath as the quarterback and just kind of put a nail in as far as being a national championship. Well, the game was one of those games is pretty much dominated early on by Texas, and as he went on through the game, Alabama kept coming back and had several chances toward the end to win. And that was kind of the discussion I had with Joe Namath, was that since they had not won, and I was describing the game, what I remembered of it, and he would have to correct me at times because he was being very polite because he was there in a sales marketing mode, so he wasn't real confrontational, but he was appreciating the banter with the Arkansas fan, and you knew that he wasn't going to change what his thoughts were. And we reflected on the fact that the '64 and how had changed, and now Alabama would not have been considered to be national champions of '64 since they got beat in the January Orange Bowl. But he said, well, that's the way it was then, and he pretty well was sticking to his guns. But the fun fact, I guess, of that in their conversation was that he wanted to make sure that I understood that he followed the Razorbacks. He watched most every game they played, and that was because he and the head coach at that time were good friends when they were at Alabama. So when we started getting into the details of that, he you could tell he did watch. He wasn't just throwing that out there, but he did watch, and I had an appreciation of what he said, and it was somewhat humorous. I mean, we started drawing a crowd because everybody wanted to kind of listen in, and but just the two of us had that conversation, which was real interesting. But that was one of the things that I had as far as celebrity. Another celebrity I met, again, this was a little later, I guess toward the end of the 90s, when Brandon Burlsworth had been tragically killed in a car wreck. And of course, he had been at the University of Arkansas and is a walk-on. His history is there, and the award, trophy, and everything out there. I've kind of talked about that in the past, and had really a podcast at one time with his brother, and we had a good conversation about that. For us, what had been done with the foundation, and so I won't go back at this point into that, but I think what the conversation there, again at the cable show, was after the tragic death of Brandon, and I was there talking with the Indianapolis Colts, the quarterback, and so it was kind of funny how he and his dad were. Well, he was young, and he was there with his dad, and I'm sure they were representing a sports booth, and they were paid to come in, sign autographs, take pictures, and whatever. But Peyton Manning and his dad were there, and he, when I mentioned where I was from and started discussing that story, he knew right away that you could see in his eyes that he knew the value that Brandon was going to be as an offensive guard to the team, and that's very critical to a quarterback. And you could see it, and he talked about it some, and we kind of had that experience. So those are kind of two I wanted to touch on. There were another one that was more of a win-win deal, that was Payne Stewart, which I talked about in more detail when I was talking to Dave Woodman, so I won't go back into that story. You can go back to the Dave Woodman podcast and you can see that. But meeting him in Argentina was a surprise, and we are from the same area, me being from Harrison area, and he was from obviously Springfield, Missouri, and about 70 miles or so separate the two cities. So those are some that are out there. You'll see several others that kind of touch on it at different times, and I'll mention those too. But I want to get into the topic a little bit about things that you love to hate, and things that you hate to love, and how they kind of enter into some things over life. I think we'll be doing some things like that in music. I know we're going to be doing some things in art. And when you start going out to the art museum, and what do you benefit there, and what do you see there, and what do you want to accomplish when you go to an art museum? We've got a lot of great art in Arkansas. You can go to Crystal Bridges in Fayetteville, or you can come down to Little Rock to the art museum here. And both have got a lot of funding from billionaires. Here, there's a lot more of the Stevens influence, and then you got the Walton's influence up in Northwest Arkansas. And then, of course, when you start thinking about other things that are out there to do and see, then you can think about how they've been influenced maybe by people that are celebrities. It's recently we saw Johnny Cash statue being unveiled up in the Capitol, and of course we've had lots of different singers that have made it big, and you can go back and kind of get into that. And one of the people I'm hoping to explore is the time that some of the other crossover talents. We think of Glenn Campbell, and by the time I got to Phoenix, but there's a lot of other singers that's been in that crossover mode, and not so much just strictly country. So we're going to see some of that, and we're going to talk with some people on that level, and maybe we'll get into some classical music at sometime. I've attended uh, operas, and I've attended a lot of different things. Uh, Actually, one of those was in Buenos Aires, and it was kind of interesting. And I've attended. I even saw, as far as theater, I saw Les Mis down here. It was done in Spanish, but you could if you've seen Les Mis, you understand the music and the story, so it wasn't that bad. It was a pretty good refresher on that sense. And then as other times I've seen plays in theater done in different countries, such as over in Hong Kong. I got to see Phantom of the Opera. Of course, they're English as far as the performance there. Hong Kong's got a big influence from the English, so it wasn't any big deal there. But it's just the culture of the people, how they accepted something like that. So you're going to see a lot of different things, and I wanted to probably bring that into play, particularly in this podcast. Was you know a little different approach to some things, and maybe open your eyes to maybe why you should try something a little different, or look at something that you maybe haven't done in the past, and that could be a little bit of getting back to the point that I mentioned earlier is you know things you love to hate, and hating things, there's other things that vice versa that you hate to love just because it seems to be popular to do. I mean, I don't know that I've listened to a whole song of Taylor Swift, but then again, her influence has been pretty wide. And when she starts attending chief football games, and there's always that draw of interest to stars. But I'm going to stop that at here and maybe edit this, but I wanted to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing next. There'll be some people we'll be doing some interviews with, and they're coming up, but some of them are just being set up now. So enjoy.